This is a Mosaic Conversations podcast. We thank you guys for joining us. I'm Paige Brooks, and we were here along with Stephen Partain. And today we have a very, very special guest with us. You know, over the past couple of weeks, we've been going through looking at our spirituality, and we've been looking at just the healthy ways that we can talk about our own spirituality and the disciplines that we can have. And today we're very, very glad to have with us the author of The Deeply Formed Life, Rich Villodas, or Villodas, or depending on what country you're in. We were talking about that beforehand, depending on how you pronounce it. But Rich, one way or the other, it's so good to have you with us. We're glad that you could join us for this time. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Paige and Stephen. Thanks for the kind invitation, and look forward to a good time with you guys.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So first and foremost, we want to get some things out of the way, because we needed to establish like some things like what are your favorite foods? Because after all, we're kind of dealing with like Queens, New York City neighborhood guy versus New Orleans neighborhood guy. So, we got to kind of work this out first. Well, actually, have you ever been to New Orleans, Rich?
I have not been to New Orleans. So I need to put that on the bucket list for sure.
Yeah. So we might have an excuse to bring you down sometime soon. So anyway, so what is your favorite food? What's your favorite food line?
I mean, for me, it's pretty standard Puerto Rican cuisine, man. So arroz con gandules, which is like this yellow rice with these pigeon peas, and I mean, my mother makes this remarkable kind of baked chicken soaked in vinegar. That's kind of like a home. If you watch Ratatouille, and at the end of the movie where the guy gets like this flashback, if I eat that meal, I'm going to go have a flashback and start crying and all that there. So I'd say that with some tostones on the side, can't go wrong with that. But then, I mean, if I can just add this here, I mean, I'm a sucker for Korean fried chicken as well. I'm not sure if you ever had that. But,
that's the gospel right there.
That is the gospel. That is the good news. So that's what I'd say.
One of our best friends here has a restaurant called Creole. It's Korean and Creole fusion food. And I say if Jesus made food, he'd be making that food. Like it's solid.
She has like this Korean fried chicken fusion that's just
incredible.
Amazing. Amazing. So there was one question that Stephen wanted to ask you. That's of utmost importance for him.
I think this just in any kind of ministry setting, you get into the deep stuff like MJ or LeBron. I feel like we have to set the stage as people. So I know where I'm at on that, but I just want to find out.
Well, let me say this here. I mean, because things have changed over the years back and forth. Now, I'm a Knicks fan. I have been severely punished and by the Bulls and Michael Jordan in the 90s. Yeah. Bad memories.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so I, over the years, I've seen Jordan as the best ever. And then I started seeing what LeBron was doing with his teammates being like the Washington Generals.
Yeah.
And he would still take all these guys to the finals. And then I was like, you know what? I think LeBron is the best ever. And then I saw The Last Dance last year, and I thought, no way is LeBron better than this guy. So I'm back with Jordan as the best ever.
Yeah, I think that's a really nuanced, good approach. I would say I'm with you. I think that Jordan's the greatest and LeBron's the best.
That's a good way of saying it. I mean, no one's overall better than LeBron. He's a freak of nature.
That's right.
And, but he does not have that killer.
Yes.
That thing. Yep. And Phil Jackson, without going into a whole basketball podcast here, Phil Jackson mentioned in The Last Dance, the thing that stood out to me most was he was comparing Kobe and Jordan. And he said the difference between Kobe and Jordan was they both wanted to win like no one else. But here's the difference. When the game was over, Kobe was a regular guy. For Jordan, when the game was over, he wanted to race you to the car. And I thought, what a nut. So so that's what makes them kind of the greatest thing.
No, that's good, man. That's good. That's
and most days I'm like,
get to know each other.
I'm like, basketball, or is that the thing with baseball? Is that the thing like, those guys. I've seen those guys on Twitter or from news at night sometime in my life. I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll recognize the name.
We got to pray for Page's coolness factor. He's
Yeah,
only in his
yeah.
40s, but he has a coolness factor of about 80. So we're still praying for that in his life.
Yeah. I'm still trying to get saved in that way. Well, anyway, hey, Rich, it's been a blessing to be able to go through the book. And at first we wanted to just kind of ask, what was it that really inspired you to write this book and kind of show us how your background tied into this? And especially, working there with Pete Scazzero. He wrote Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, just a life-changing book, at least for our ministries and for us personally. If any of our listeners have not read that book or gone through it, like we encourage that. And of course, right after that, we encourage to go through the Deeply Formed Life, of course, that we're going to be talking about today. But just kind of tell us about your background and the inspiration for bringing this book to fruition.
Yeah, the book, some people write out of pain, some people write out of a sense of, vision about what they want to see, all legitimate, great ways of writing. I think I wrote from a place of pastoral urgency. And in the similar way where Eugene Peterson, when he translated the Message, what a lot of people don't know about him is that came out of a desire to shepherd his people effectively. And so he's reading through the book of Galatians with some of his congregants, and they don't really understand what Paul is getting at. So he said, let me try to translate it in accessible language. And then one thing led to the next, and then we have, this Message Bible. In a similar way, the 5 values that I write about in the book, contemplative rhythms, racial reconciliation, interior examination, sexual wholeness, and missional presence, those are the 5 values of our congregation. They've been our values for a number of years. What I started hearing almost every Sunday was someone coming up to me saying, when you say contemplation, what do you mean? Or what do you say racial reconciliation? What are you getting at? When you say sexual wholeness, and so I got so many questions, and I thought, I better codify this in some way for our people, and for whether they're new members, whether they're leaders, our pastoral staff. Let's get some shared language, some nuanced theology, and some very practical ways to live this out. I think it just so happened that those 5 values happen to be pretty urgent and important for our time. And so it came out of pastoral concern. And I use different language to reach people outside of our context because we call them our 5 M's, those 5 values. But that's the first reason. And the second reason, and sometimes when I say this, it feels a bit presumptuous or a bit like an overreach. But I do believe that what I'm trying to offer in the book is an ambitious reframing of spiritual formation for our generation, holding together aspects of faith and discipleship that are often segmented and compartmentalized, and saying, no, all of this belongs in our discipleship, especially in this particular cultural moment.
Yeah. That's good. No, I really appreciate it. I feel like a lot of, and maybe you can tell me if I'm on the right track, a lot of what I got out of the book was we have people that are great at orthodoxy theologically. We have people that are great at spiritual direction and formation, and those traditions tend to go in opposite directions. And you seem to be trying to help our generation kind of, I guess, integrate those two, so that you can have the head and the heart more in line with actual everyday life.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd say when I think about it, there's usually 3 layers that come to mind for me in my own experiences. For me, it's the 3 traditions that have really shaped me over the 22 years that I've been following Jesus. I've been, the evangelical tradition, the charismatic Pentecostal tradition, as well as kind of like the mainline progressive traditions. And in each of those traditions, there's a particular emphasis. Evangelical tradition often emphasizes right thinking, whereas the Pentecostal charismatic is right experiences, and kind of the progressive mainline is right action, justice and all that in the world. And often those never meet. And beyond that, those often don't have a spirituality of interiority, where they are, drawing from the contemplative tradition, drawing from emotional health traditions and such. So what I'm trying to do is hold all those things together and add layers of depth to it as well.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. Yeah, the book's been really helpful for us in our thinking with our churches and our network. One of the questions that I thought would be helpful for us to go through is, can you help us kind of frame the idea that we're all being formed by something consistently? And really, you talk about the story of your professor, which I thought was very helpful in the beginning of the book, of this realization that you have. And so just the idea that we're being formed consistently, you have this moment of realization, and this causes some thinking, some change in your own life. So maybe you can help us think about formation that's happening all the time to us. What does that look like? What are the things that are forming us? And then, how do we begin to shift and think differently about being intentional about that?
Yeah, yeah. And for your listeners, when I was a college student, I was given an assignment to give a 30-minute presentation on postmodernism. And problem was I didn't really read the book. And so I had skimmed the desk cover, read a few other things, and put together a PowerPoint. And midway through the presentation, it was pretty clear that I didn't read the book. And so midway, he stops me and says, "Hey, Rich," in front of, 25, 30 other students, "you didn't read the book, right?" And I kind of sheepishly was like, I really didn't. And he said, "All right, keep going." And I kept going. And it was a fairly decent presentation. And so at the end of it, he says, "Rich, can you stick around for a bit?" And there were some people in the, ooh. And I remember exactly where I was on the campus, book bag hanging off one of my shoulders. And he said, "Rich, you have a gift and a curse. The gift is you can read the dust cover of a book and give a 30-minute presentation. And the curse is that you'll think that you can live your entire life like that. But character is more important than gifting." And I was so angry at him because it was just like, how dare you kind of, but he was right. And I never forgot that moment, that character precedes gifting. Along those lines of what you mentioned, that's the essence of really the deeply formed life. How are we growing deep roots of and being formed by Jesus in the way that Paul mentions in Galatians? I'm in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. And this presupposes that every single day we are being potentially shaped and formed by various forces, whether those forces are from our family of origin and the negative legacies that we've inherited that are continuing to shape us in ways incompatible and inconsistent with the kingdom of God, whether they're just larger cultural forces of antagonism and polarization or in superficiality or speed. We're always being shaped and formed in some way. The deeply formed life is essentially saying, am I being formed in the way of Jesus and into the person of Jesus? And at what pace and am I is going to yield me that kind of ultimate formation that I'm longing for?
You mentioned something that's really important, that the character precedes the gifting, and especially right now with everything that's going on in our Christian world, not just the evangelical world, but I mean, we've got moral failures, character failures, leadership failures across the spectrum. It's no longer limited to just the Catholic Church or just to the evangelical church. Like, it's across the board. And, I've been talking with our pastors and several of our pastors in the network, and, we do value the accountability that we have with one another. We value the openness and honesty and authenticity that we have with one another. But that's also come because we've developed it. We've worked for that. That's one of the values that we have to hold to ourselves personally. But it also comes with having the right contemplative rhythms of being able to work, first of all, on ourselves, and then from there being able to help and minister others, depending upon our context. And so, we love, of course, the way that you've brought together a lot of those contemplative rhythms, and borrowing, again, from several traditions, even from the ancient traditions, bringing those into the modern day and time. Kind of talk us through the first steps that you might recommend to a person, because just like when you were talking about earlier, you might say contemplative to a person, and that might seem foreign to them, or then you might say, oh, these are monastic, and all of a sudden people think we're trying to become Roman Catholic.
Right.
And not all that is true by any means. It's just that we're trying to bring together the best of the different traditions of Christ followers across the world. But all that to say, work out for us, what are some of the first steps that people can take for the more contemplative monastic traditions that you found that have really worked for you and for your church as well?
Yeah, and I get this all the time. I'm in so many different circles. I have the privilege of being in many different circles with people who have different points of resonance with some of this language. And when I talk about the contemplative tradition or meditation, really to be human is to be contemplative. And what I mean by that is we all have had contemplative moments. One of the things that comes to mind is I never forgot when my wife and I were dating, first started to date. And after our first date, she sent me a text message the next day. And it was just like a really nice, like great time. It was like a small text, but I stared at that phone and read those words over and over and over again. My mind was fixed on what she shared. And what was I doing? I was contemplating. I was fixing my attention and my gaze upon someone and about something. Really, that's the essence of life, isn't it? When we're captured by beauty and enraptured by love, we fix our minds and attentions on it. That's the contemplative life. And so to be human is to be a contemplative. In terms of living that out, as I think about contemplation, very simply, it's really slowing down to be with God, slowing down to be with God. Or if I can use other language, it's in order to catch up to God, we need to slow down, to go at God's pace. And that's the paradox of it. And I think of a few practices for me that I have discipled many others through that come to mind. One is just silent prayer. Much of our prayers tend to be very loud and marked by verbosity, lots of words. But I think there's an element of prayer that often goes missing in many of our traditions, especially our evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic traditions. And that's just prayer as being with. The same way that if I'm with my wife, sitting on the couch or driving, there are not a lot of words that are exchanged all the time. Sometimes we're just with each other, sharing presence. And what happens there is it moves beyond transactionalism. And prayer is too often transactional. I say this, God delivers on that. I pray the right prayer and God responds in this way. And I believe in intercession. I believe in petition. I believe in all that. But it feels like too much of our prayers are transactional.
Right.
Contemplative prayer is, I'm just going to share presence with you in silence. And yes, my mind is going to get distracted. And yes, I'm probably going to be all over the place. But Lord, I'm here. And as St. Augustine said, you are closer to me than I am to myself. And so I want to sit here. So that's one just of the practices that I talk about. Another is just the slow reading of scripture. Where all of us have our phones and we're scrolling through our phones and speed reading through our phones. But there's a slow reading of scripture where we're able to take bite-sized chunks of the Bible and slowly stick with it, as opposed to having to read the entire Bible, which I'm all good with reading the entire Bible in 1 year and all that. But it's slow bite-sized portions of the Bible and scripture that I'm slowly allowing to permeate my soul. And the third one that I often teach on is on Sabbath keeping, about slowing down a 24-hour period, literal period, without anxiety or have-tos, which over time is to lead to deep rest and renewal. Those are the contemplative rhythms I think we desperately need for a world that is hurried, harried, exhausted, depressed, superficial. But at the essence of it, it's slowing down to be with God.
Yeah. One of the things that we try to do is for our staff, for our people, is encourage those times of rest and rhythm. And of course, different paces for different people, but like nobody protects your schedule the way that you do, and nobody can say no the way that you do. And so one of the things that we've tried to just really work on, and that I continually strive to work on, and that is to take that disconnect and to have that time off. And thankfully that during July here, the church has given me kind of a half sabbatical. Still have to work during the week with some other jobs that I do, but they've given me off for Sundays to where I can take that time to be with the family on the weekends. And it wasn't something we tried to hide. It was just something that we really tried to use as an example to our church family to say, thank you guys for giving us this gift And now we want to use it because we want to then pour back into you. But then everybody needs this time to be able to have the rest and renewal, that we need, and the disconnect that we need. Well, that was a really great first part of our podcast with Rich Villadas. I think, Stephen, he just gave a lot of great insights for us, and just helping us understand kind of where he's coming from in writing the book with The Deeply Formed Life. And I think probably one of the things that was a highlight for me in talking with him was the connection that he makes with the inner contemplative life, along with the aspect about justice and how, and it's not just the aspect of justice, but it's about everything that we have on the outside of our life is deeply connected with the inside of our life. I think that he does a great job of talking about how we are so superficial in almost everything that we do. Our entire focus is on the exterior, but being able to connect those two together is absolutely necessary for people to really live healthy, holistic lives, honestly, for the way that God created us.
Yeah, I think that what he does a good job of, and even he talks about the story of his professor. I think that, what we want for our people, our leaders, our churches, is to be able to shift and to realize how often we're so exterior focused, and shift into more contemplative rhythms of life. Mm-hmm. And what we mean by that doesn't mean you're going to become a monk, right? People think that that's the, either you're going to be working in the world all the time, or you're going to be on the hillside praying 24/7. Right. And really what we're saying, and what Rich talks about, is to be formed by Christ really is to step into a way of life that slows down. Mm-hmm. So he actually says, slow down to catch up with God. Yeah. Which I thought was a great way to say it. So I think for us, especially kind of in this new political context, cultural context, these rhythms are going to be not only important, but essential for healthy Christian living.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And to make that connection between things like justice that we work for, mm-hmm. that it's not just about putting out a social media tweet and then all of a sudden saying, oh, I'm glad, look at me, I've made my statement out there. No, it's about being able to really, really work hard at some of those different aspects of justice that need to be addressed in the world. And I think about our ministries, even based here in New Orleans, how we're in an urban environment. We are in a very spiritually and physically exhausting environment, not just because of the city mm-hmm. of New Orleans itself, but the populations that we sometimes work with. Like, seeking justice and having the contemplative life connected with that, it's not just about me being able to do something on my phone and put out a tweet, but it's about the deep work that comes with justice, that it is exhausting to confront injustice that we see in our world. And you have to have that interior contemplative life to be able to do it. You have to have the rhythms of rest to be able to do that, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a great example is, leading a church in New York City. We have intensity in New Orleans as an urban environment and a lot of issues, but being in New York is obviously going to be at the top of the heap just on day to day and busyness and people that need your attention, things that need your attention, and so it is encouraging to see those rhythms be played out, and maybe one of the most intense in urban environments on the planet. And we can take that and go, okay, this is helping, his slowing down is helping him be more effective as a man, as a husband, a father, a pastor, a leader. Mm-hmm. And so we think about for us that, it's, we're not selling out by having good rhythms or taking a Sabbath. We're actually, deepening our lives and being more effective. And so I think that it's just encouraging. The book's just really, really good. Mm-hmm. I would say this is kind of a go-to at this point for people to think about spiritual formation from an author who he's solid theologically, but he culturally really understands the moment mm-hmm. and can really apply these things to people that are asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, it was really great talking to him during the first part of our interview, and we're going to broadcast the second part of our interview in the next podcast edition. So certainly we want everyone to join us for that. So, but thank you guys for joining us here for this first part of our interview with Rich Villadas for The Deeply Formed Life. I'm Paige Brooks.
I'm Stephen Partain.
And we'll see you guys next time in the next episode.